And I serve on the board of the DupageUU Universalist Church. I welcome everyone to our service this morning and welcome visitors to our open and inclusive community of faith. As Unitarian Universalists, we hold that there are many spiritual paths to truth and meaning, and we support one another as we each explore these paths. I would like to especially welcome our guests and welcome again those who have visited us before. Visitors, it is our custom in this congregation to invite you to stand and give your name and where you're from if you feel comfortable doing so. Are there any visitors who would like to introduce themselves? Welcome. Welcome. Welcome back. Welcome to everyone visiting today, and please join us after the service for our coffee hour. We would love to have a chance to get to know you better. Our minister, Reverend Tom Capo, and our congregational life coordinator, Mary Law, and all of our members are eager to meet you. Please feel free to approach anyone with a green cup, or even a white cup, with any questions you might have. Our service can be heard outside the glass doors at the back of the sanctuary should anyone feel the need to leave the service for any reason. There are chairs provided for your convenience. Please look at the insert in the order of service for other announcements, except we have a special announcement today.
Hello. My name is Jenny Hobbs, and I am proud to serve on the church's auction committee. So this year's auction theme is Doctor Who, a little regeneration, anyone? And it will be on Saturday, November 4th. If you are new to the Goods and Services auction, it is the church's largest annual fundraiser. Quality items such as artwork, handcrafted items and jewelry, services that you can provide or buy, and all manner of super creative events or parties you can attend or host are auctioned off in a silent and live auction format. We have fabulous auctioneers. You can purchase tickets and fill out the donation form online or on our new auction website, which is live, and it is awesome, so please go check it out. The link will be available on the member area of the new website for the church, in the newsletter, and in the weekly email updates and the Facebook page. So there's lots of places that you can go to find that link. Please get your donation forms in early and check the calendar on the website to figure out a date for your event or party. The sooner you enter your donation form, the sooner you can secure the perfect date for your party or event. So thank you in advance.
We light our chalice today in memory of Joseph Priestley, an 18th century English scientist who discovered oxygen, believed in the free and open exchange of ideas in the French Revolution, and most importantly, was an early Unitarian. Good morning.
Good morning.
We gather today to ponder the natural world, which is a source of inspiration for many members and visitors here at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. There are many ways to view nature, for example, as a spiritual retreat, as a resource for sustaining our species, or as a mystery to be investigated. That's what we're going to do this morning. Last Sunday, Reverend Tom examined nature through the lens of spirit, and this service is an intentional counterpoint to his service. I encourage you, if you missed it, to check the DVD of his August 20 service out in the church library. Today, we invite you to consider nature as scientists. We can all begin to do this whether we have a degree in science or not. While becoming an expert in a scientific field requires rigorous education and hard work, beginning to look at nature through the lens of science is not at all difficult. All that is required of us is our innate curiosity, a humble desire to learn about what we do not understand, and the strength to acknowledge that what we think should be true may not match up to what is actually true. For, in the words of astrophysicist Neil Tyson, and I quote, "The good thing about science is that it's true whether or not you believe it."
I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join us in speaking the mission statement of this church, which is printed in your order of service and projected to your left. We gather as an inclusive community to grow in character, mind, and spirit, and to transform the world toward fairness, love, and compassion. And now please remain standing for our first hymn and our only hymn. Enjoy it. Number 44, we sing of golden mornings.
The reading today is from one of the most influential science books of the 20th century. In 1962, Thomas Kuhn published The Structure of Scientific Revolutions right here in Chicago by the University of Chicago Press. 50 years later, the anniversary edition was published. The book has sold about 1.4 million copies just in the English version. Quoting from the book, "Scientific development depends in part on a process that is revolutionary. Some revolutions are large, like those associated with the names of Copernicus, Newton, or Darwin. but most are much smaller, like the discovery of oxygen. What are claimed to be objective scientific facts are often really never more than just the opinions of a small group of people based on a culturally determined paradigm that changes often over time. With Kuhn's background of paradigms, our service is about nature through the lens of science. It was described in our newsletter as Descartes, the forest, and you. It's deliberately designed to be a counterpart to Reverend Tom's service last Sunday entitled Nature Through the Lens of Spirit. So I'm first going to talk a bit about Descartes and the scientific revolution. I'm then going to talk a little bit about the natural sciences and conclude by sharing with you my personal opinion. Let's start with René Descartes. Here he is, friendly-looking fellow. Descartes made pioneering scientific discoveries from around 1625 to 1650. He is considered to be one of the key figures in starting the modern scientific revolution. Modern science emerged in the next 100 years as the scientific method of hypothesis, testing, and open verification was applied to physics, astronomy, biology, chemistry, and other natural sciences. A mystery is something strange or unknown, which has not yet been explained or understood. The goal was to solve the mystery of the natural world. The end of the modern period is usually considered to be dated to Isaac Newton's explanations of the laws of natural motion concerning the physical objects in the real world that you see with your own eyes. The world was far less mysterious by 1800 than it had been before. Much more was known about how the world worked, but not much more was known about why it works as it has been described working. Just to be clear, let's do a quick review of the scientific method. Remember high school science? There it is, make an observation, formulate a hypothesis, test it, gather data, develop a theory, and go forward. Kuhn says that that is a fine process, but the results are illusory. From the personal perspective, Kuhn's concept of a paradigm shift continues to work as follows. The old paradigm was a belief, what was unstated, in the internal powers of the human mind to figure things out. The modern scientific method says no, we should drop reverence for the wisdom of the past and explain things exclusively through the scientific method. You can't argue with results. The Industrial Revolution followed. Of course, a lot was happening in theology at the same time. Our focus today is on the natural sciences, not the social sciences, like economics or religious studies, but a word or two about us. And it relates to our chalice lighting friend, Mr. Priestley. The word Unitarian first appeared in a printed book in English in 1673. Unitarianism gained popularity in England in the wake of the Enlightenment, and in 1774, Joseph Priestley was one of the people who founded the first avowedly declared Unitarian church in all of England. A little aside, as we were previewing the slides, Mara mentioned that, oh, she grew up in this church. They talked about Priestley and R.E. several times. So our curriculum has not forgotten Mr. Priestley. In Priestley's time, deism was the fashionable religion. Deism posits that there really is a supernatural God out there, up there somewhere, but that God does not interfere directly with the world. Deism also rejects revelation as a source of religious knowledge, with the conclusion that reason and observation of the natural world are sufficient to lead you to the conclusion that there is a single God who created the universe. Still a lot of supernatural mystery stuff. Modern science has produced amazing medical cures for illnesses, hybrid plants that have enormously increased the world food supply. There's no point for me to go on and on about material progress in the last 300 years. Unfortunately, the human race during the same scientific progress period produced weapons and machines and 2 world wars, not to mention genocides in Africa, Asia, and Europe. Today, there are chemical, biological, and radiological weapons of mass destruction in 7 countries around the world. We might be better off for not having split the atom. The dismal state of world affairs in 1933 resulted in the issuance of the first Humanist Manifesto. With regard to my topic today, I'm going to quote a bit from Article 5th of the first manifesto. Quote, "Humanism asserts that the nature of the universe depicted by modern science makes unacceptable any supernatural or cosmic guarantees of human values. Obviously, humanism does not deny the possibility of realities as yet undiscovered, but it insists that the way to determine the existence and value of any and all reality is by means of intelligent inquiry and by the assessment of their relation to human needs. Religion must formulate its hopes and plans in the light of the scientific spirit and method." End of my quote. Sad fact, World War II and the Holocaust, so much for human progress. The second Humanist Manifesto responded in 1973. It states in part that traditional dogmatic or authoritarian religions that place revelation, God, ritual, and creed above human needs and experience do a disservice to the human species. Any account of nature should pass the test of scientific evidence. We begin with humans, not God. We begin with nature, not deity. But Kuhn doubts such faith in science. The humanists reply that chemistry remains chemistry, iPhones work, statins work, so how can you argue against the results? There is something to be said for the pragmatic approach. When you see an eastern climax forest out your window, which is the forest type here, do you see a complex ecosystem or do you see chemistry in action? Since the invention of the electron microscope, we know that atoms are real and that everything you see externally and internally is simply the ceaseless transformation of energy into matter and matter into energy. Note that I included the word feelings because modern science says what you feel results from electrical impulses in your body, atoms moving around. Are you skeptical? Sound too much like Buddhism or Hinduism? I need my ADP slide. There we go. I am not a scientist. I am an investment lawyer. But all the science books say that all the life you see in the forest around you, plant and animal, is based on individual cells. This is the energy process that transforms energy that can be used from chemical atoms. But the mystery remains. Why did evolution select the cell structure? No one knows. But chemical processes at the cellular level produce the energy for all the plant and animal life you see when you look at the forest? Does knowing that make it more or less interesting for you? Does knowing this make it more or less enjoyable? For me, the answer is clearly yes. The more you know, the richer the experience. The result of this belief, I have lots and lots of field guides. Do you read 4 or 5 movie reviews before going to see a new movie? If you do read 4 or 5 reviews before you go, you'll notice things in the movie that you would have missed otherwise. In my opinion, the same is true of going out into the natural world. The next time you are going to take a long drive on an interstate, buy the roadside geology guide for the state. It'll make your trip more interesting. By the way, plate tectonics is a perfect example of what Kuhn meant by paradigms and paradigm shifts. Nobody alive before the 20th century would have believed that the continent you're standing on is actually drifting and moving around planet Earth. However, I also recognize the fact that you can overdo anything, including knowledge. Martin Buber's famous book, I and Thou, is relevant here. For Buber, there are I, it, and I, thou relationships. In I-it relationships, the object of experience, the it, is viewed as a thing to be utilized, a thing to be known or put to some purpose. In experience, we see our object as a collection of qualities and quantities, as a particular event in space-time. There is a necessary distance between the experiencing I and what I am experiencing. This can result in viewing the natural world only as an impersonal it. This leads to resources being exploited by such practices as strip mining, instead of seeing the natural world as a thou that we have a relationship with. If you take knowledge too far, you just objectify everything and do unnecessary harm. If you were here last week, you heard Reverend Tom talk about nature, spirituality, mindfulness. I agree with the content of all he said, but I have trouble with some of the words he used, particularly the word spirituality. If you'll remember, a connotation of an idea is the feelings that a word invokes, in addition to the literal denotative meaning. For example, when you hear the word home, do you think of a physical structure, the denotation? Or do you think of things invoking feelings like warmth, comfort, and affection? So, the word spiritual. For me, that's a very confusing, vague, and somewhat negative word because there are connotations for me that include my early days in Sunday school a very long time ago. Does spiritual mean a Holy Spirit? Some vague emotion I feel? Some invisible or mysterious thing that exists somewhere unknown? Some vague thing outside me knocking on my door? Or Reverend Tom's example last week of Eckhart, the Christian mystic? Here is my answer. Agnes and I drove to Missouri to be in the path of totality, a rewarding thing for us to do together. Did I have a spiritual experience sitting in a beautiful prairie with my wife of 48 years as the moon passed in front of the sun? Or did I just have a great day? For me, just telling you it was a great day to be alive makes much more sense. Thank you.
Good morning. We have two scripts here. Okay, here we are. For our second reading today, we will view the Minute Earth video, Why Are Leaves Green? Part 1. Minute Earth is a collection of scientists, writers, and illustrators who present scientific findings in videos via YouTube, far more interestingly than I can alone. I highly encourage you to look it up on YouTube if you are interested in such things. It's a really good way to pass about 4 hours after you plan on spending 20 minutes, and you can learn a lot about geology and physics and biology and more things than you ever thought you would learn about in 20 minutes. In this particular video, they expand on one question that many of us asked in elementary school and thought that we learned the answer to: why are leaves green? But of course, when it comes to science, any answer begs another question.
You may have learned that leaves are green because they're full of a green molecule called chlorophyll. It's the reason for the greenness of plants, from moss green moss to grass green grass to evergreen evergreens. And the reason chlorophyll is so incredibly popular, showing up in nearly every plant on Earth, is that it's good at soaking up sunlight. The more light a plant gets, the more energy it has to make sugar and grow tulips and kumquats and do all the other things plants do. But wait a second, doesn't the fact that chlorophyll is green mean that it's actually bad at absorbing green light? I mean, sunlight is composed of the whole rainbow of colors, each a separate wavelength, and the colors we see when we look at a leaf are the wavelengths that leaf isn't absorbing. That is, they're the ones that bounce off the leaf and reach our eyes. Chlorophyll is great at absorbing reds and blues, but if it were really awesome, wouldn't it absorb all colors of light, green included, giving us a world full of black moss and black grass and ever-black trees? So why aren't leaves black? And since they apparently don't have to be black, what's stopping them from being red or blue instead? Is green just nature's favorite color, or is there something special about those wavelengths of light? The short answer is that we don't know for sure. Some scientists speculate it's serendipity that plants today are green. Long ago, Earth's oceans were filled with purple single-celled organisms called archaea. Being purple, they absorbed green light and let red and blue pass through. The theory is that this minus green light was the only source of solar energy in the deep water below. So bacteria living there got really good at absorbing everything else but green. And the molecule that did the light absorbing? Chlorophyll. Maybe. What we do know is that chlorophyll, as wasteful as its failure to absorb green light may be, turned out to have other biochemical advantages over the purple competition. And perhaps as a result of this ancient biological rivalry, the plant world today is green and not purple or red or blue. Of course, you might still wonder why plants didn't develop black leaves once they emerged from the depths. I mean, they changed a lot of other things going from bacteria to mighty redwood. Well, maybe it's simply that nature isn't about perfection, and life doesn't need flawless black to get by, just good enough green. Or maybe plants were even more clever and turned the weakness of chlorophyll into a strength. But we'll have to leave that story for later.
So was that enough information in approximately 2 minutes and 38 seconds for you? So what I love about looking at nature from a scientific perspective is that the questions that sound simple often lead to very complicated answers. Why is the sky blue? How do mussels work? Why do people grow? Why are leaves green? Children ask us these questions, and often we stare back at them, slightly flabbergasted. And if you asked an expert in meteorology or biology or physics, you could receive a very long answer. Because when we use science as a way to view the world, every answer leads us to more and more questions. For me, these questions are a form of awe and wonder. One of the 6 sources of inspiration that our religion affirms is the direct experience of transcending mystery and wonder. And this is what I feel when the questions start simply and then begin to unfurl their wings. So take, for example, why leaves are green. It seems simple to explain that leaves are green because they contain chlorophyll, and chlorophyll is green. A bag of blue rocks is blue. Duh. But this answer leads us to another question. If leaves are green because they contain chlorophyll, why is chlorophyll green? And there many of us hit a wall. I personally do. It turns out that chlorophyll doesn't contain anything in particular that makes it green. It just reflects green light back at us. It's a trick of physics. Greenness is in the eye of the beholder. And it is humbling in that moment to realize how much goes on in my brain, in my eyes, in a leaf, that I have no concept is occurring every second of every day. And the questions don't stop there, because if we know why leaves appear green to us, then we might start to wonder, as the authors of this video did, why aren't they some other color? And the question is slightly grotesque, right? A forest of black trees. Oh. But when you consider the physics, it's a pertinent question. If leaves require light to create energy, to stay alive, in a world that only rewards those who stay alive, why aren't they black? Or at least a really dark green? Wouldn't absorbing more light be helpful? And it turns out that leaves have developed various ways of leveraging chlorophyll's strengths and limiting its weaknesses. For one thing, leaves don't miss out on all of the green light that comes at them. Chlorophyll might be bad at absorbing green light, but leaves also contain other molecules called carotenoids, which are yellow or green in color. And this is in fact what we see in leaves in the autumn, when the green in the leaves disappears. Chlorophyll is not necessarily the most expensive thing for a plant to build, but it's too valuable for them to just leave it out in those leaves that fall off every year in the winter. And so the trees dismantle the chlorophyll, leaving the carotenoids there, which is what colors our forests, beautiful, beautiful colors. These carotenoids are able to absorb green light, and they use it to fuel photosynthesis. So in the end, between one thing and another, a leaf can actually use about 80% of the green light that hits it. So plants are clever, or at least lucky, because chlorophyll has advantages over the competition as well. There aren't actually that many molecules in existence that can absorb sunlight without basically just falling to pieces. If you observed the eclipse this past week, you know that sunlight is very powerful. Do not stare directly at the eclipse. And as a result, many molecules simply are not able to do what chlorophyll does. And so plants don't have a lot of options. And when you compare their options, amongst the many that there are, a system that uses chlorophyll to fuel photosynthesis is both cheaper to build and actually more powerful than those using other molecules. Now that sounds nice, doesn't it? I wish I had a TV that was cheaper to build and more powerful. It seems too good to be true, but plants have found a way to make it work. They are more energy efficient by using this cheaper and more powerful chlorophyll system, even if they miss out on a small amount of light. Of course, when it comes to evolution, energy efficiency is what wins out. So basically, plants lucked out when they found a cheap but powerful molecule that they could use to make energy out of light. And they found a way to make it work just well enough to beat the competition. It might not be the perfect method, and to me, there is a lesson there. It works well enough, which is comforting, because none of us is perfect every day, but most of us are good enough most of the time. And millennia of evolution have made it work very, very well. Plants, after all, if you'll permit me stretching a little, they may have been more successful than human beings. They have survived and thrived after global catastrophes far before humans, mammals, even animals existed. In fact, the ancient ancestors of plants, called cyanobacteria, sort of discovered photosynthesis. They caused a global mass extinction. They triggered a global ice age. They threatened their own existence by producing oxygen that was toxic to nearly every other living bacteria on the planet, and nearly killed themselves when the climate of the planet changed so drastically that they barely survived. Nevertheless, the plants persisted. And without them, human beings that breathe oxygen would not exist. Now, there is a cautionary and tentatively inspiring tale. We can hope that with a prefrontal cortex and a cultural system of ethics, we might be able to outdo cyanobacteria. We cross our fingers. So leaves seem like a simple topic. For one thing, leaves are for the most part very small. You see them almost every day, if you're lucky. But when you dig deeper into them, they suddenly become larger and far more complicated. Consider again, leaves are responsible for nearly all of the energy that keeps you alive every day. Every fruit, vegetable, or grain that we consume gained its energy from a leaf. And any animal meat or dairy that we consume got its energy from a plant that it ate, or from an animal that ate an animal that ate a plant. Nearly all of the energy in our bodies, we are quite literally made of energy that came from leaves. And that in itself makes leaves worth learning about for me. It is profoundly humbling. We can know so much about nature, and yet for every fascinating question, we can research the answer until we find the limits of human knowledge. The question marks in the video that we saw. Maybe. The point at which we must simply say, we don't know yet. And some mysteries of the universe may resist our every effort to understand them. To be honest, I usually reach the limitations of my own personal understanding before I reach the limits of scientific understanding. Since I am not a professional scientist, many things will always be a mystery to me. I find this spiritually inspiring, perhaps because I must. But nevertheless, it is a joy to wonder. And those small parts of the universe that I do understand are like friends that I encounter again and again. In every leaf that I take the time to ponder, there lies the reminder of what we do know about chlorophyll, about photosynthesis, and why the forest in front of me is a beautiful sea of green leaves. We are now going to do a meditation, a leaf meditation. The stewards will pass out leaves for you to consider. And this might be slightly different from meditations you have done before, because our goal is to consider the leaf from a scientific perspective and to attempt to draw meaning from that experience. And while you receive your leaves, I will tell you briefly about them. These leaves are from the blue wild indigo plant outside my front door. There is actually one, possibly more than one, in the church prairie, and I can show you where it is on the way out. Its scientific name is Baptisia australis. It is a native plant to this area, and its scientific name actually comes from the fact that its roots can be used to produce a blue dye, which is inferior to the indigo dye that came from Europe, but it was similar enough that the settlers decided to call it wild or false indigo. Baptisia comes from the idea of baptizing or dipping fabric to dye it, and australis refers to the southern portion of some area, which must have been some relative description at the time, because it grows quite well in the Midwest, and I don't think it grows in Colombia. In the spring, you can see spires of beautiful purple flowers growing on the blue wild indigo. And then they become quite interesting green and then dark gray pods as they form seeds. You may recognize the flowers, if you are a gardener, as being similar to those of a pea plant. This is because blue wild indigo is in the legume family, which is also home to plants that are beneficial to humans, like peas, like beans and alfalfa and soy. These plants are the nitrogen-fixing plants, well, among the nitrogen-fixing plants. But before you get terribly sentimental about the legumes, it is also home to plants considered weeds in some areas, such as black locust trees, gorse, and kudzu. And while false indigo is related to many edible plants, it is not itself edible. Please do not eat your leaf. Use the other 4 methods of observing, not taste. So once you have your leaf, you can place it in your hands, or you can hold it in another way if you find that more satisfying for observation. You can relax your body back into your chair and turn your mind towards this place, towards your body, towards the complex piece of life that you hold in your hands. Notice as you breathe in, notice as you breathe out. Observe the color of your leaf. Its texture, its size, smell the leaf. Rub it between your fingertips. Consider the questions that you have about your leaf or about the plant that it came from. Reflect for a moment on what you do not know about your leaf. Perhaps what no one may know about it. And now I invite you to imagine the tiny photons of light streaming through the windows, some absorbing into your small leaf. A few of the blue and green photons reflect back at you, giving it color. Many of the other photons continue into the leaf, deeper within. At this very moment, a photon jostles within your leaf until it hits a molecule of chlorophyll and begins photosynthesis. And another photon, and again, and again, and again. Wonder for a moment how many photons are hitting your leaf right now, invisible to your eyes. How much energy is it making as it lies there in your hands? What else do you wonder about your leaf? What else do you not know? As you breathe in, some of the oxygen you inhale comes from the leaf that you hold. in this very moment, energy flows from the sun to the leaf, to you. What will you do with the energy of the universe that resides briefly in you? Thank you.
It's always difficult to transition from the meditation, but we now need to attend to more mundane matters. Carl Sagan once said, and I quote, "For small creatures such as us, the vastness of the universe is bearable only through love." On our tiny planet, spinning through a universe we have only begun to understand, our love for each other and for this community keeps us together. The offering for the support of this church will now be given and received. Thank you, Bonnie. That was terrific. If you recall, I ended my sermon by talking about my day watching the eclipse. For our ending benediction, I have selected a Hindu poem called Salutation to the Dawn. Look to this day, for it is life, the very life of life. This day holds all the verities and realities of your existence, the bliss of growth the glory of action, the splendor of achievement, and the pain of losses and defeats. Yesterday is but a memory, and tomorrow is only a hope that you will still be alive. But today well lived makes yesterday a memory of happiness, and tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. This is how you should greet every new day in your life when you wake up in the morning. Thank you for our time together. Now, I invite you all to rise and greet your neighbors.